The communication array on station Kepler 438b hummed with the usual background chatter of a dozen civilizations conducting their daily business across the galaxy. Trade negotiations between the crystalline Vorthok and the gaseous Nemeans, scientific data exchanges from the peaceful Aldorian research colonies, weather updates from the agricultural worlds of the Centauri Union. Then everything changed. At 1432 Galactic Standard Time, a transmission cut through every frequency like a knife through silk. The signal was weak, degraded by distance and interference, but its contents made every being in the communication center freeze in terror. "This is Captain Zethara of the exploration vessel Starweaver. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. They destroyed the peaceful dawn in seconds. No warning, no communication attempts. Our shields are failing. We're transmitting our location and all sensor data. If anyone receives this, warn the Council. These beings show no mercy. They take prisoners only to... Oh gods, what are they doing to the survivors? This is a threat to all civilized life. Request immediate assistance. We cannot hold them much." Static. Silence. Commander Thilla of the Aldorian Diplomatic Corps felt her four hearts skip in unison. Her pale blue skin turned almost white as she processed what they had just heard. The Aldorians were among the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy, and in their 15,000 years of recorded history, they had never encountered a species that attacked without provocation. "Run the signal through the language matrices," she ordered, her voice barely a whisper. "Identify the attackers." Her communications officer, a young Vorthak named Kristek, whose crystalline form was flickering with nervous energy, worked frantically at his console. "Commander, the linguistic analysis is troubling. The attackers spoke briefly during the transmission. The language is completely unknown to our databases, but the mathematical analysis of their ship signatures suggests technology that's advanced, very advanced." "More advanced than ours?" Kristek's form dimmed, which in his species indicated deep concern. "Possibly, Commander. Their energy signatures suggest weapons that could destroy our largest dreadnoughts in a single strike." Thyla closed her eyes and centered herself using the meditation techniques her people had developed over millennia. The galaxy had known peace for almost 3,000 years, ever since the Galactic Accord had been signed by all major civilizations. Wars were things of ancient history, conflicts resolved through diplomacy and economic measures. "Send an immediate alert to all member worlds of the Galactic Council," she commanded. "Priority Alpha. We need to verify this threat and organize a response." Within hours, the response came back from the Council chambers on the neutral world of Harmony Prime. The Galactic Council, a governing body representing 47 different civilizations, convened an emergency session. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered virtually, their forms displayed as holograms in the Great Circular Chamber. Chancellor Vex of the Nemeans, a being of shifting gases contained within an environmental suit, spoke first. "We have confirmed the destruction of the exploration vessel Starweaver. Long-range sensors detected massive energy discharges in the system. There are no survivors. The Peaceful Dawn was a civilian transport carrying families to a new colony world, 12,000 beings, including 5,000 younglings." The chamber erupted in sounds of distress from multiple species, whistles of anguish from the Aldorians, harmonic wails from the crystalline Vorthak, and deep rumbling moans from the massive Goliathan representatives. "What of the attackers?" asked Elder Tarn of the ancient Zephyrian collective. His people were among the most technologically advanced in the galaxy, masters of quantum mechanics and dimensional theory. "Unknown," Chancellor Vex replied. "The ships that destroyed our vessels left no debris, no identifying markers. They simply vanished." "Have we attempted to contact them?" This from Ambassador Quillen of the Terran Federation. The chamber fell silent, Ambassador Quillen was human, and humans were still relatively new to galactic politics. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago and had been granted membership in the Galactic Council just 50 years prior. Most of the elder races still considered them to be a young, somewhat primitive species. What many of them didn't fully understand was that humans came from a world the galactic classification system had labeled as a Class 12 death world. Chancellor Vex's gases swirled in what his species indicated as confusion. Contact them? Ambassador Quillen, they destroyed 2 ships without provocation. What diplomatic contact could be possible? Ambassador Sarah Quillen stood slowly. She was a tall woman with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many conflicts in humanity's violent history. Unlike the other species represented in the chamber, humans had evolved on a planet where violence was not just common, but necessary for survival. While other civilizations had developed philosophy, art, and science during their evolution, humans had perfected the art of war. Chancellor, with respect, my people have some experience with hostile first contact scenarios. Before we organize any kind of defensive response, shouldn't we at least attempt to understand their motivations? Perhaps they perceived the exploration vessels as threats. Elder Tarn's ancient form shimmered with disapproval. Ambassador. The crews of those ships were scientists, families, explorers. They carried no weapons. Their intentions could not have been misinterpreted. Sometimes, Quillen said quietly, peaceful intentions don't matter to those who have already decided you're an enemy. The debate continued for hours. The majority of the council favored a defensive approach. They would reinforce border systems, establish early warning networks, and attempt to negotiate if the attackers made contact. It was the civilized approach, the way conflicts had been resolved for millennia. But Ambassador Quillen sent a priority message to Earth that night. The message was simple. Unknown hostile force has attacked civilian ships. Casualties in the thousands. Attackers show advanced technology and no interest in communication. Recommend Terra Military Command assess threat level and prepare appropriate response measures. The response from Earth came back within hours. It was equally simple. Assessment complete. Threat level designated Alpha Red. Terra Defense Fleet is mobilizing. Expected deployment to Galactic Council space within 72 hours. Recommend all civilian ships avoid border regions. What the other members of the Galactic Council didn't understand was that humans had been preparing for this day since they first achieved spaceflight. While other species saw the vast emptiness of space as a peaceful frontier to be explored, humans saw it as the ultimate battlefield. Every ship in the Terran fleet could be converted to military use within hours. Every colony had been established with defensive positions in mind. Every human in space had received basic military training. Because humans knew something the other species had forgotten in their thousands of years of peace, somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, something was always hunting. And now, something had found them all. The morning after the council session, long-range sensors detected 17 more ships entering the outer rim of galactic space. The energy signatures matched those of the attackers. But these ships were different. They were larger, much larger. As Commander Thilla watched the sensor readings update on her display, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. Each of the new ships was the size of a small moon. Her communications officer looked up from his station, his crystalline form flickering with barely controlled panic. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission. This one is different. Play it." The voice that emerged from the speakers was cold, mechanical, translated by computer systems that somehow made it even more terrifying. "We are the Void Reapers. You have 30 of your rotations to evacuate all civilized worlds in this galactic arm. Any who remain will be harvested. Any who resist will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is an announcement. Your time of peace has ended." Silence fell over the communications center like a funeral shroud. 30 rotations was barely a month in Galactic Standard Time. There were billions of beings living on hundreds of worlds throughout the Outer Rim. Evacuation was impossible, but 50 light-years away, aboard the Terra Defense Fleet flagship Indomitable, Admiral Chen Wei was studying the same transmission with very different thoughts. "How many ships do we have in the immediate region?" he asked his tactical officer. 47 vessels, Admiral. Mix of destroyers, cruisers, and the dreadnought Prometheus." "Good. And our response time to the Outer Rim?" 18 hours at maximum burn, sir." Admiral Chen nodded slowly. He was a veteran of the Titan Rebellion and the Europa conflict, the last major military actions in human space. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for the day when humanity might face an existential threat. "Signal the fleet. We're moving to intercept, and send a message to Galactic Council Command." "What should the message say, Admiral?" Chen's eyes were hard as he looked at the tactical display showing the massive enemy ships advancing toward populated worlds. "Tell them the Deathworlders are going to war." Across human space, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Colony ships dropped their loads and began conversion to military specifications. Mining vessels armed themselves with industrial lasers and makeshift armor plating. Trade ships loaded up with ammunition and supplies, transforming into support vessels. But most importantly, the reserve fleets began to mobilize. The other species of the galaxy saw humans as violent, but limited. They knew Earth had a decent military, but they assumed it was primarily for maintaining order in human space. What they didn't realize was that humans had been building for this moment since they first left their home world. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belts, military reserves that hadn't been activated in decades, weapons research facilities that had been developing new technologies in secret. Within 72 hours of the first distress signal, over 3,000 human ships were converging on the Outer Rim. It was the largest military mobilization in galactic history. As Admiral Chen watched his fleet jump to hyperspace, he thought about the peaceful civilizations they were racing to protect. Species that had known only diplomacy and negotiation for millennia. Beings who had never faced an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. They were about to learn why humans had earned the classification of Deathworld survivors. The Void Reapers had made two critical mistakes. First, they had assumed that all spacefaring civilizations would react to threats the same way. Second, they had never encountered a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill anything that threatened its survival. They were about to discover what happened when you threatened humanity's adopted family. The first engagement happened at the edge of the Kepler system, home to 3 billion Aldorian civilians and one of the galaxy's largest research facilities. Long-range sensors detected the approach of 2 Void Reaper vessels, each the size of a small city and bristling with weapons that defied conventional understanding. Admiral Chen's fleet had arrived just 6 hours earlier, taking defensive positions around the populated worlds. The sight of human warships had caused quite a stir among the local population. Most Aldorians had never seen a military vessel up close. Their own ships were designed for exploration and trade, elegant constructs of flowing curves and artistic beauty. Human ships looked like they had been built in a weapons factory, because they had. "Admiral, the enemy vessels are charging weapons," reported Commander Martinez from the tactical station. "Energy readings are off the scale. Whatever they're planning to fire, it's more powerful than anything in our databases." Chen studied the holographic display showing the 2 massive Void Reaper ships approaching the system. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered prey that could fight back. "Signal all civilian ships to retreat to minimum safe distance. Activate all planetary defense systems and patch me through to the Galactic Council Command." Chancellor Vex's gaseous form materialized as a hologram on the bridge. "Admiral Chen, Surely you don't intend to engage these vessels directly. Our sensor analysis suggests their technology is far superior to ours. Perhaps we should attempt communication. Chancellor, with respect, they've already communicated their intentions. They're here to harvest your people. We're here to stop them. Chen's voice was calm, professional. He could have been discussing supply schedules instead of preparing for humanity's first major military engagement in galactic space. But Admiral, the risk is mine to take. Chen out. The Admiral turned to his fleet commanders, all veterans of humanity's various conflicts. These were people who had learned warfare in the asteroid belts, in the radiation storms of Jupiter, in the frozen hell of Europa. They understood something the peaceful civilizations of the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be exceptionally good at war. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Today we're not just defending human interests. We're protecting civilizations that have forgotten how to protect themselves. The enemy expects us to run. They expect us to negotiate. They expect us to die quietly. He paused, looking out at the stars that held billions of innocent lives. They clearly don't know much about humans. The first Void Reaper weapon fired without warning. A beam of pure energy that should have obliterated the lead human destroyer, Defiant. Should have. Instead, the beam struck the ship's experimental deflector array and scattered harmlessly into space. The technology was new, developed in the secret research facilities of Titan using principles that human scientists had theorized but never tested in combat. The bridge of the Defiant shook from the impact, but Captain Reynolds simply smiled. Well, that got their attention. All ships returned fire. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. Human weapons weren't the most powerful in the galaxy. They weren't the most advanced, but they had one characteristic that the peaceful civilizations had never developed. They were designed to kill things that were trying to kill you. Every human warship carried multiple weapon systems. Kinetic accelerators that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, plasma cannons that could melt through ship hulls like butter, nuclear torpedoes that could crack asteroids, and experimental weapons that military research had been developing for the day when humanity might face an unknown enemy. The first salvo from the human fleet struck the leading Void Reaper vessel like a hammer hitting glass. Explosions cascaded across its hull as dozens of different weapon types found weak points in its armor. The massive ship, which had destroyed 2 civilian vessels without effort, suddenly found itself fighting for survival. But it wasn't the weapons that shocked the Void Reapers. It was the tactics. The peaceful civilizations of the galaxy had forgotten that warfare was an art form. They had weapons for defense, basic tactics for protecting their borders. Humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the science of killing their enemies while keeping themselves alive. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully choreographed. They used the system's asteroid belt for cover, emerging from hiding to fire and then disappearing again. They coordinated their attacks with precision timing, overwhelming the enemy's defensive systems with multiple simultaneous strikes. Most importantly, they fought with a savagery that the Void Reapers had never encountered. Captain Reynolds watched his tactical display as the first Void Reaper ship began to list. "Target their engines. Don't let them retreat to warn their fleet." "Sir, we're receiving a communication from the damaged vessel." "Put it through." The voice that emerged was cold and mechanical, but for the first time it carried a note of confusion. "Unknown vessels. Identify yourselves. Your technology should not be capable of penetrating our defenses." Reynolds smiled grimly. "This is Captain Reynolds of the Terran Defense Fleet. Your defenses weren't designed to deal with humans. Surrender now and we'll allow you to withdraw." "Surrender?" The concept seemed alien to the Void Reaper. "We are the harvesters of civilizations. We do not surrender." "Then you die," Reynolds said simply, and cut the connection. The second salvo from the human fleet was even more devastating than the first. The lead Void Reaper vessel, its shields collapsed and engines crippled, tried to ram the human flagship. It was a desperate move, the action of a predator that had suddenly found itself prey. Admiral Chen watched the massive enemy ship bearing down on his vessel with the calm of a man who had faced death before. Evasive maneuvers. All ships, concentrate fire on the second vessel. Don't let it escape. The Indomitable rolled away from the ramming attack with an agility that seemed impossible for a ship its size. The crippled Void Reaper vessel passed harmlessly by and exploded when its damaged reactor finally failed. The second Void Reaper ship, seeing its companion destroyed, attempted to withdraw. It had underestimated these unknown defenders and needed to report back to the main fleet. It never made it. Human pursuit ships, smaller and faster than the main battle line, had been waiting for exactly this moment. They swarmed the retreating vessel like wolves bringing down a mammoth, their weapons systematically destroying its engines and weapon systems until it hung dead in space. "Sir," reported Commander Martinez, "the second vessel is disabled but intact. Should we attempt to board?" Admiral Chen considered the question carefully. Intelligence gathered from an intact Void Reaper ship could be invaluable, but boarding actions were dangerous, and these enemies had proven they would rather die than surrender. "Negative. These things came here to harvest civilians. We're not taking chances with our people's lives. Finish it." The final torpedo spread that destroyed the second Void Reaper vessel was witnessed by sensor stations across 3 systems. Within hours, every civilization in the galaxy had received the same impossible data. A human fleet had engaged and destroyed 2 Void Reaper vessels without losing a single ship. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Chen received a priority communication from the Galactic Council. "Admiral," Chancellor Vex's voice was filled with amazement and something that might have been hope. "The sensor readings we're receiving, are they accurate? You actually defeated them?" "We did what we came here to do, Chancellor. We protected innocent people from an aggressor. The question now is, what's our next move?" From across the galaxy, reports were flooding in. The Void Reaper main fleet, estimated at over 200 vessels, was accelerating toward the galactic core. They would reach the first major population centers within days. But something else was happening that had never occurred before in galactic history. The peaceful civilizations were asking the warriors for help. "Admiral," Chancellor Vex continued, "the Council has voted. We are requesting that the Terran Defense Fleet take operational command of all galactic defense forces. We don't know how to fight a war." Chen looked out at the debris field that had once been 2 seemingly invincible enemy ships. His people had just proven that the Void Reapers could be beaten, but they had also proven something far more important. Sometimes the only way to preserve civilization was to remember that some things were worth fighting for. "Understood, Chancellor. We'll need full access to your shipping networks for supply lines, authorization to recruit volunteers from all member worlds, and complete tactical control of all military assets." "Done." "Admiral, how long until you can mobilize the full defense of the galaxy?" Chen was already running calculations in his head. Human reserve fleets were still mobilizing from across their space. Military conversion of civilian vessels was proceeding ahead of schedule. Most importantly, humanity's secret weapon development programs were finally being activated. For 2 centuries, human scientists had been developing weapons and defensive systems not just for fighting other humans, but for the theoretical day when they might encounter truly alien enemies. The peaceful races of the galaxy had spent those same centuries perfecting art, philosophy, and diplomacy. "Give us 72 hours, Chancellor, and warn all civilian populations in the Outer Rim to begin evacuation procedures. This is going to get worse before it gets better." As the communication ended, Admiral Chen turned to his staff. They were already working on deployment schedules and tactical assessments, but he could see the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders. They weren't just defending humanity anymore. They were defending an entire galactic civilization. "Sir," asked Commander Martinez, "do you really think we can mobilize enough force to stop their main fleet? 200 ships, each the size of a city?" Chen looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Void Reaper armada. Any sane military commander would look at those numbers and recommend immediate retreat, but humans had never been accused of being completely sane. "Commander, in the past 72 hours, we've had over 3,000 ships volunteer for this fight. Mining vessels converted to missile boats, trade ships loaded with nuclear warheads, colony vessels turned into mobile command centers. And those are just the civilian conversions." He gestured to a classified report on his desk. "Our military reserves are activating weapons systems that have never been tested in real combat. Some of them are based on theoretical physics that other civilizations declared impossible." "And if they don't work, sir?" Admiral Chen's smile was cold and predatory. It was the smile of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a world where everything was trying to kill it. "Then we'll find another way to win, because that's what humans do." In the secret shipyards of Luna, massive construction bays that had been sealed for 50 years were opening for the first time. The ships emerging from those bays were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were built for one purpose: to kill things so effectively that they would never threaten humanity again. The Void Reapers had made a fatal error. They had awakened a species that had turned warfare into an art form, and now, for the first time in galactic history, the peaceful civilizations had apex predators fighting on their side. The Battle of the Nexus would be remembered as the day the galaxy learned what humans meant when they said, "No surrender." The Void Reaper main fleet had arrived at the Galactic Nexus, a massive space station that served as the diplomatic and economic heart of civilized space. Home to representatives from every major civilization, it was also the central hub for trade routes that connected hundreds of worlds. The station's population of 12 million beings represented the greatest diversity of galactic civilization ever assembled in one place. Scientists, diplomats, artists, families, traders, and scholars from 47 different species. All of them now trapped as 200 Void Reaper vessels surrounded the station like a massive metal noose. The enemy commander, who identified himself only as Reaper Prime, had made his intentions clear in his final communication. "Your champions destroyed 2 of our vessels. This was unexpected. But you have only delayed the inevitable. We will harvest this station first, then proceed to your core worlds. Your resistance has earned you additional suffering." Admiral Chen's combined fleet had taken position 3 hours away from the Nexus, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant. The human admiral now commanded the largest military force in galactic history. 8,000 ships from dozens of species, all under unified human command. But they were still outnumbered by an enemy whose technology remained largely unknown. "Admiral," reported Colonel Sarah Kim, his chief intelligence officer, "our analysis of the debris from the Kepler engagement is complete. The Void Reaper ships use a form of quantum phase armor that makes them nearly immune to conventional energy weapons." "Nearly immune?" "Yes, sir. The armor has a specific resonance frequency. If we can match that frequency with our weapons, we can penetrate it. The problem is that each ship seems to have a slightly different frequency." Chen studied the tactical display showing the enemy formation. 200 ships, each capable of destroying entire fleets, positioned around the most important station in the galaxy. The mathematics were simple. Even if his fleet destroyed every enemy vessel, the Nexus would be obliterated in the crossfire. "What about the new weapons from Luna Shipyard?" Colonel Kim's expression was troubled. "The quantum resonance cannons are ready for deployment, but they're completely untested. Theoretical models suggest they should be effective against the quantum phase armor, but if we're wrong, we lose everything. Yes, sir. Chen turned to the holographic display showing the representatives of the Galactic Council. Chancellor Vex's gaseous form was flickering with obvious distress. Elder Tarn looked older than his already ancient years. Ambassador Quillen stood silently, her face showing the grim determination that had become characteristic of humans facing impossible odds. "Chancellor," Chen said, "I need authorization for Operation Deep Strike." The entire council chamber fell silent. They had been briefed on the operation, but none of them had truly believed the humans would attempt something so audacious. "Admiral," Chancellor Vex said slowly, "that operation will put your entire fleet at risk. If it fails, we're all dead anyway. But if it succeeds, we end this war before it consumes the entire galaxy." Elder Tarn's ancient voice carried the weight of his civilization's long history. "Admiral Chen, in 15,000 years, the Aldorians have never encountered a military strategy as aggressive as what you're proposing. Are you certain there's no alternative?" Chen looked at the tactical display one more time. The enemy fleet was in perfect position for their plan, but they would only get one chance. "Elder Tarn, sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to risk everything to save it. We're going to save the Nexus, all of it." Ambassador Quillen stepped forward. "Admiral, you have Earth's full authorization. Do what needs to be done." The plan was simple in concept, impossible in execution. Phase 1. A volunteer force of converted civilian vessels would approach the enemy fleet openly, broadcasting surrender signals. The Void Reapers, based on their previous behavior, would attempt to capture these vessels for harvesting rather than destroying them outright. Phase 2. While the enemy was focused on the surrendering ships, the main human battle fleet would use experimental stealth technology to approach from the opposite side of the system. Phase 3. At maximum close range, the entire human fleet would activate their quantum resonance weapons simultaneously, targeting the enemy ship's specific frequency signatures that their computers would calculate in real time. The plan required perfect timing, completely unproven technology, and volunteers willing to act as bait for an enemy that showed no mercy. Within an hour, Chen had more volunteers than he needed. Captain Maria Santos, of the converted mining vessel Prosperity, led the volunteer fleet as it approached the Void Reaper formation. Her ship and 40 others had been stripped of weapons and fitted with modified transponders that broadcast surrender signals. "This is Captain Santos to all volunteer vessels. Remember, we're not heroes trying to die for the cause. We're professionals trying to live long enough for the Admiral's plan to work." The response from her volunteer captains was universally calm and determined. These were civilians who had chosen to risk everything to protect their home station. Mining ship captains, cargo haulers, even luxury cruise vessels had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in galactic history. "Reaper Prime, this is Captain Santos. We're requesting permission to surrender. We have 41 vessels carrying approximately 50,000 civilians. We offer no resistance." The response came quickly. "Approach Vector 127 Mark IV. Any deviation will result in immediate destruction." As the volunteer ships moved toward the enemy fleet, Admiral Chen's main force was implementing the most complex stealth approach ever attempted. Human stealth technology, developed for operations in the crowded space around Earth, was being pushed to its absolute limits. 8,000 ships moving in perfect coordination, their positions synchronized to within meters. Any mistake, any ship falling out of formation, would reveal the entire fleet and doom the volunteers. "Admiral," reported Commander Martinez, "the volunteer fleet is within the enemy formation. Sensors show the Void Reapers are beginning boarding operations." Chen felt his jaw clench. Those brave volunteers were now in direct contact with an enemy that viewed other species as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Every minute they bought with their courage brought the main fleet closer to striking range. "Sir, we're receiving coded transmissions from the volunteer ships." "Put them through." Captain Santos's voice was tight but controlled. "Admiral, you need to see this. The Void Reapers aren't just harvesting biological matter. They're downloading information, languages, culture, technology. They're not just destroying civilizations. They're stealing everything that makes them unique." The communication was cut short by the sound of weapons fire. The volunteers had been discovered. "All ships," Chen commanded. "Execute deep strike now." What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. 8,000 ships dropped their stealth fields simultaneously and opened fire with weapons that had never been tested in combat. The quantum resonance cannons worked exactly as theoretical models had predicted. The Void Reaper ships, caught completely off guard by an attack from an unexpected direction, found their quantum phase armor useless against weapons that matched their exact frequency. But the Void Reapers were not helpless. Their response was immediate and devastating. The space around the Nexus became a storm of energy beams, missile strikes, and explosions that could be seen from neighboring systems. Ships died by the dozens on both sides as the largest naval engagement in galactic history unfolded. Admiral Chen watched his tactical display with the calm of a chess master executing a complex strategy. All carriers, launch fighters, destroyers, protect the heavy cruisers, battleships, focus on the largest enemy vessels. The human fighters were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Small, fast, and piloted by humans who had grown up in the three-dimensional combat environment of space, they swarmed through the enemy formation like angry wasps. Their weapons were small, but they could target specific systems with surgical precision. "Sir, the volunteer fleet is fighting back. Captain Santos has somehow armed her mining vessel with improvised weapons." On the screen, Chen could see the converted civilian ships engaging Void Reaper boarding vessels with industrial equipment turned into weapons. Mining lasers cut through enemy fighters. Cargo manipulator arms grabbed enemy ships and threw them into each other. Construction drones had been fitted with explosives and were conducting kamikaze runs against enemy vessels. It was insane. It was desperate. It was completely human. "Admiral," called out Colonel Kim from her analysis station, "I'm detecting something strange from the enemy command ship. Massive energy buildup. It's not a weapon signature." "What is it?" "Unknown, sir. But if I had to guess, they're preparing to run." Chen smiled grimly. After millennia of easy conquests, the Void Reapers had finally encountered prey that bit back harder than they could handle. "Signal all ships. Don't let any of them escape. We end this here." The final phase of the battle was a coordinated strike against the Void Reaper command vessel. Every surviving human ship concentrated their fire on the massive enemy flagship, their quantum resonance weapons tearing through its armor like paper. As the command ship died, something unexpected happened. The remaining Void Reaper vessels simply stopped. They hung motionless in space as if their crews had simply abandoned them. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the destroyed command ship. It's not from the crew." "Put it through." The voice that emerged was different from the cold mechanical tones they had heard before. It was organic, tired, and filled with something that might have been relief. "Unknown defenders. This is Sub-Commander Thexus of the Catherian Science Corps. We have been enslaved by the Void Reapers for 3 centuries. Their command structure has been severed. Their control systems are failing. You have freed us." The revelation sent shockwaves through the combined fleet. The Void Reapers weren't a single species. They were a collection of enslaved civilizations, forced to serve as soldiers in an endless campaign of conquest. Over the following days, as the surviving enemy vessels were boarded and their crews liberated, the true scope of the Void Reaper Empire became clear. Dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, all enslaved by the original Void Reapers who had perfected the technology of mental domination. But the original Void Reapers were gone now. They had been aboard the command ship when it was destroyed, and with them died the psychic network that controlled their slaves. 2 weeks after the Battle of the Nexus, Admiral Chen stood in the Galactic Council chambers receiving the thanks of a grateful galaxy. But his thoughts were on the volunteers who hadn't made it back, and the enemy soldiers who had been slaves forced to fight against their will. Admiral Chen, Chancellor Vex addressed him formally, the Council has voted unanimously. Humanity will be granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Security Council, with full authority to organize the galaxy's defense against future threats. Chen nodded respectfully, but his response surprised everyone in the chamber. Chancellor, we're honored by your trust, but humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy's defense. We want to teach it. Every civilization needs to remember that freedom isn't free. It has to be protected by people willing to fight for it. Elder Tarn's ancient voice carried new respect. What do you propose, Admiral? Joint training exercises, shared military technology, most importantly, a galaxy where no civilization ever again has to face extinction alone. As Chen left the council chambers, he thought about the message that had started it all. A distress signal from a doomed ship, calling for help that their own people couldn't provide. Never again. Humanity had answered that call to protect civilizations they had never met, to save people they had never seen. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of a truth that peaceful societies sometimes forget. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be exceptionally good at war. The Void Reaper threat was ended, but the lesson remained. Across the galaxy, defensive fleets began training with human advisors. Weapons research programs started developing new technologies. Most importantly, the peaceful civilizations began to remember that survival sometimes required the will to fight. The galaxy was still peaceful, but now it was peaceful by choice, not by accident. And in the depths of space, Admiral Chen's fleets continued their patrols, watching for threats that might emerge from the darkness between the stars. Because humans knew something that the other species were just learning. The universe was vast and full of wonders. But it was also full of things that would destroy those wonders if someone wasn't willing to stand guard.